My today's topic it's about global inequality and more precisely about the theory of division between the developed countries and the developing countries, known as North and South divide. So this is the map of the world, and according to this theory, the most developed countries they are located in the northern hemisphere, while the least developed countries are located in southern hemisphere. We also call them as EDC, economically developed countries, and LDC, least developed countries. And according to this map, it's pretty visual, except for some exceptions, like for example, South Africa or Australia, or for example, Saudi Arabia. It looks like this map is correct. Actually, this map exists since the middle of the Cold War. It's been more than 50 years of that we talk about um, the first world, the second world, and the third world, referring to the first world as the economically developed countries, the second world during the Cold War were the communist countries, and the third world, it's the rest, usually least developed countries, usually countries that recently had acquired their independence. So you may say, well, the things are changing, the world is changing, but it seems like that North continues being North and the South continues being South, and there are different reasons for this situation to happen. So we may see the North-South divide in economy, in poverty, in measurement of development, in life expectancy, in literacy, and many other aspects. So first of all, let's look at our most important economic indicator, which is the GDP. This is the nominal GDP. That's a few years ago. And you may see, well, there is no north-south divide. Look, for example, at Brazil, it's pretty dark. Look at the Eastern European countries, they have very bright colors. Look at China, it's very dark. So you may say, well, it's not, there is no such a divide. Well, the question is, why the Chinese so dark? Well, because they have a huge population. Also, for example, look at India. India has huge amount of poor people and it has huge population, and that's why the total production it's pretty big, though the production per person is still pretty low. So in order to compare different countries of different sizes, we are going to use, as you know, the GDP per capita. So this is the same map of the GDP per capita, and now you see, well, the situation is changing, and it looks pretty different from the previous one. Now China is not so dark. Also, most of Northern Europe is very dark color, representing a big amount of GDP per capita. Also, United States is going to be in dark color. Australia, it has a very big GDP per capita. Over there, you may see Japan and South Korea. This is Saudi Arabia, even though Saudi Arabia is not a truly developed country, but in terms of oil production, they produce a lot of oil and sell it, and have a relatively small population. So as a result, the GDP per capita is going to be high. So let's go on. Often we talk about global poverty and the divide. We say that the richest 15% produce $67 for each dollar produced by the 40% of the poorest population. By this, we want to emphasize that the small richest countries, they are way more productive because they have better technological development, because they have better industrial development. As a result, they produce much more. And when we talk about poverty, we usually mention that we have around 1 billion people that live in least developed countries with less than $1 per day. This, for a long period of time, this was like a criteria of absolute poverty. Today, they have raised this level to, in some countries, it's $2. In other countries, they talk about $5 per day as the limit for poverty. But still, even today, we may talk about almost 1 billion people that live below this ancient $1 per day poverty line. Why is North and South so different? Well, first of all, they have a different political experience. Most of least developed countries or countries of the third world, they were colonies of European countries, of economically developed countries. And once they got their independence, this independence usually followed by a period of war, political instability. They lack strong democratic institution. They lack strong economic institution. So all this create a lot of economic and political instability that do not let those countries easily develop their economies. Also, they have a very different economic structure. Meanwhile, the northern countries, they have a wide industrial base. They produce a lot of different products. Even the most developed country, they are going to produce some simple products, agricultural products, and highly technological products. Meanwhile, the countries in south often they depend on just one product, like it happened for a long period of time when we've been talking that Mexico is dependent on petroleum, and when the price of petroleum is going to change. This is going to affect the budget of the Mexican government. This was a typical situation. Some other countries of the south, for example, they produce only, let's say, coffee, or they produce mostly banana, etc., whatever the case is going to be. So this graph that you may see, it compares the gross national production with the total population. And you may see the first line, it represents the huge population that live in the south, and this same blue line, that small one, is represent that they are producing only 20% of global national products. Meanwhile, the small population of the north, that is less than 20%, produce almost 80% of global products. So this is also, we already talked about the GDP per capita. So I want you to compare. Once again, if you use PPP as purchasing power parity, it's going to be lower the difference. If you use nominal, it's going to be even higher the difference. But we may say that comparing Luxembourg with, let's say, 35, 40,000 per capita, in Sierra Leone then with less than 500, it's almost 70 times higher, like the GDP per capita. So it's a huge difference. It's not just like twice, it's not 10 times, it's 70 times bigger in developed countries than in some poor African country. Talking about poverty, once again, this is a very low poverty line of just $1 per day. If we will raise it like to $5 per day, we're going to have a different numbers, but still, for you to have an idea, you may see that on this map in gray are the countries that we don't have information when they were making the map. So but you may say, well, Mexico is relatively good, though I really do not trust those numbers. I think it's higher. But you may say Africa is very poor. In Asia, we have lots of also poor countries that are not doing so well, and they have huge amount of poverty. This is the Human Development Index. Once again, you already know that Norway is one of the most developed countries in the world. The rest of developed countries are going to be, for example, in Europe, also Australia. Also, you may talk about Japan and South Korea, about United States, even though it's United States is quite a case because of inequality. And you may see the rest of the world, the global South. It's Africa is going to be very poorly developed, and Asia also is going to be still lagging behind. So when we talk about North and South, we talk about different life expectancies. So in most of developed countries like Japan and Switzerland, life expectancy is about 80 years. Meanwhile, in several African countries, we talk about life expectancy from 40 to 50 years, which is fluctuating due to local wars, conflicts, and epidemics. And so when we have those problems, it's going to become lower, and then it's going to raise later on. But still, it's a huge difference. It's like almost twice in comparing the lowest life expectancy to the highest one. This is the map of life expectancy. Once again, you may see that like south is going to be colorful, meanwhile the north is going to be green. Well, Russia is an exception due to political instability that they had recently experienced. But it's they are slowly recovering to also to the group of 70 plus 75 more or less years. So another thing is access to education and to literacy. In most of developed countries, the literacy rate is going to be 100%. There are no children who may not go to school and who do not know how to read and write when they are adults. Meanwhile, over there, look at Afghanistan, the literacy rate is about 10%. So almost nobody knows how to read and write, and especially this is have like a difference in in case of women, that the girls in those countries um, they do not know how to read and write. In Mexico, we have almost 90%, more or less, approximately. So Mexico is not doing so badly in terms of education. Like in the last years of pre-period, they had made emphasis on promoting the literacy, and well, it is still a problem because 10%, that's a huge percentage, but still it's way better than many other developing countries. So this is the literacy rate on the map. Once again, you may see clear difference. North is blue, south is all other colors that you may have. Um, And to you will say, so what is being done to address those problems? Well, in the end of the millennium, we had developed the Millennium Development Goals, which are going to address precisely those inequalities between people in poor countries and the rich countries. Most importantly, what we wanted to do is to reduce child mortality, to promote gender equality, to promote universal primary education in all countries of the world, no matter poor or rich, eradicate completely poverty and hunger, and several more. And as you know, we did not achieve most of these goals, at least not completely. So that's why today we have the Sustainable Development Goals that you already know. Once again, no poverty, zero hunger, um, uh, good health, quality of education, gender equality, and well, those that addressing ecological problems, they are also going to be added there, but you may still see that these main goals that we were trying to achieve, they're still pending, and we still need to resolve them in order to reduce this global inequality between north and south. Because it's sometimes we talk about the dependency. We say that the countries of south, they may not develop because they're dependent on the countries of the north, and the big businesses of the north, they're going to not let those poor countries develop. So when we talk, for example, about the investment, uh, most investment happens in the already developed countries that have good economy, that have good infrastructure. Meanwhile, the countries of the south, they often suffer from corruption, from economic instability, so that's why they do not receive the same amount of foreign investment. Also, there is a term, the topic of debt. Most of the countries of South, they have acquired huge debt with the countries of North. Yes, there were intentions and some part of the debt was pardoned, but still it's a huge obstacle for the development of the countries of South. And this is the map of hunger. Once again, you may see that countries of the south are going to have varied. We still have like huge populations in the world that do not have nothing to eat. This is 2015, but trust me, it didn't change that much yet, sadly. And what are the exceptions? Well, we have the term for the newly industrializing countries, or NIC, and we refer to the countries that are quickly developing their economies. And Mexico was one of them, but sadly, like the Mexican economy was kind of stagnating the last years, so it really didn't become the new South Korea as we expected 10 years ago. But well, it's doing better than the average developing country. Also, when we talk about Argentina, that is like a mixture. Once again, its economic situation, they were doing fine, then they were doing not so good. Brazil, Singapore, Taiwan is quite successful economically, and several more. And of course, we have the countries in transition. You already seen Russia on the map, and in several economic indicators, Russia is not doing so well. Why? Because well, almost 30 years ago, they started the transition from the communist system to capitalism, and in some countries, this transition really was smooth, well, more or less through a crisis, of course, and it was quite it created economic problems, but they had made their way to developed more or less stable democracies. Meanwhile, some countries are still in the process of achieving this.